Many South Africans are being stretched to the limit with food prices continuing to climb. Consumers are foregoing necessities as the cost of living crisis deepens, and now we're seeing these high fuel price hikes as well, which means there'll be pressure on inflation, which might lead to interest rate hikes, although inflation has been coming down recently. Now, in contrast to a stable salary, a high unemployment rate, these living expenses are rising. So what can be done to alleviate these financial pressures in a low economic growth environment? To help answer some of these questions, I'm joined by economist Roelof Botha and Joseph Makamba Busha. Gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. I mean, wherever you look at whatever point, South Africans are being squeezed. I mean, the economy growing by 0.6%. Yes, it's a growth, but it's very small. Can I begin with you, Mr. Botha?
Yes, I just want to inform the viewers that there are so many definitions or ways to calculate GDP, but if I'm looking at the Stats SA data, quarter on quarter, our real growth rate, constant 2015 prices, was in fact 3.5% positive, which is pretty good. And year on year, it was 1.6%, which is not as good as 3.5, but it's if you have to round that off, it gives you 2%. So it's not bad under the circumstances. And I think it's important for us to appreciate the main driver behind this growth is capital formation. Our imports of machinery and equipment have reached an all-time record high. If those people that are worried about the balance of payments, you have nothing to fear, because these type of imports generate GDP growth. And as a matter of fact, the latest PwC economic outlook has identified this investment in renewable energy, especially solar, as one of the key drivers, which will probably mean that next year we will have not only higher growth, but significantly less load shedding with a bit of luck.
Your outlook seems positive. Do you share that, Mr. Busha?
Well, one of the things we need to do really is to put everything into context in terms of where we are as a country. The long-term target growth rate is above 5.4 to be able to generate jobs and so on. I think this is what National Treasury said some years ago, that this is what we need to do. So certainly 1.6 year on year is positive, and the quarter-on-quarter growth of 0.6 is just above what the economists were expecting, which is 0.3. So as you said, that this is really just positive, but is it good enough? I think to be able to cure some of our social issues, in particular, the high unemployment rate we see. So electricity issues, in terms of the load shedding, remains the big elephant in the room, in the sense that we can't be firing all cylinders in terms of agricultural production and in terms of the factories. So it is good to get a positive number, but is it good to be able to sustain, the immigration or migration into urban centers to be able to reduce the unemployment rate in the country?
Yeah, I mean, the last quarter numbers driven from what we've seen, we've been told manufacturing, agriculture and mining, and that was the last quarter. We didn't have such serious kind of load shedding. Now, as I speak to you, gentlemen, we are sitting at stage 6. We are hoping that it won't remain like this for too long, and that could impact for it. Do you see this 1.6 year-on-year growth you've referred to, Mr. Botha, getting better? Getting more? You seem to be very positive that we're going to have better electricity supply as well by next year, and things will look rosier for us.
Yes, well, thank you. I'm known as an optimist, but the data is backing me up right now. And perhaps we should also quickly look at what can be done to boost this growth rate. But if you look at the second quarter figures for the specific sectors, I mean, all of them are looking quite good, especially agriculture, but it's a small sector. It doesn't add a hell of a lot of value. Finance, real estate and business services is by a long shot the biggest sector, and that has grown in real terms quarter on quarter and year on year. But what needs to be done right now is for the Monetary Policy Committee at the South African Reserve Bank to please appreciate the fact that we do not have demand inflation in this economy. Raising interest rates will not bring down the price of meat. The reason why we had high inflation, together with most of our trading partners for the last 2 years, was because of a 700%, I'm going to repeat that, 700% increase over 2 years in sea freight shipping charges. And 80% of all tradable goods get shipped by the ocean. So it was no wonder that everybody had high inflation, and we had much lower inflation, significantly lower, than some of our key trading partners in the US and in Europe. One of the reasons for that is that we are a huge net exporter of food. We are the most food secure country on this continent. So we've got a lot of things going for us. But what government needs to do right now is to change the composition of the Monetary Policy Committee to also include economists from National Treasury, from trade and industry, and from the private sector, so that we can analyze inflation a little bit deeper and find out what works. To think that you can take a country so far removed from the major markets of the world, in the southern tip of Africa, and pinpoint an inflation rate is madness. It's madness. Inflation is within the target range. It's almost at the midpoint. What we need right now is a drop in interest rates of 300 basis points. Then we will get the property sector going. We will get a lot of sectors, hospitality in this country going, and create jobs. That's number one.
That's number one. Okay, we'll explore number 2 and number 3 with you shortly. But Mr. Busha, let me bring you in here. You hear that very strong message coming from Mr. Botha saying the Reserve Bank needs to drop interest rates. But I mean, ordinary South Africans, I mean, as I said in the beginning, are feeling the squeeze. And with the fuel prices going up, what we've seen in the past, gentlemen, is that when fuel price goes up, especially diesel going up by whopping 2.08 Rand or something like that, it affects a bigger value chain. And then invariably, you and I as consumers pay the price. So going forward, if you have to look ahead, I mean, can we look forward to lower interest rates maybe, and inflation is in track, and the cost of food, I mean, food inflation, it did drop, I think, a couple of months ago, month on month, but it's still high.
So household spending constitutes about 66% of the GDP. Household spending is down 0.3%. As you put it, fuel is going up. NESA, I think, approved Eskom's electricity hike. In terms of salary hikes or wage increases, they've been below inflation or just inflation. What that means is basically people or households do not have enough disposable income to be able to contribute basically to the GDP growth we're talking about. Inflation came down 4.7 from 5.4, which is good. But the fact that the rand has remained very vulnerable, and petrol is just going up again, which is one of the biggest drivers in terms of inflation in the country. What that means then, Reserve Bank might not be able to decrease the rate by 300 basis points. It will certainly be very good, because I think, there will be more people getting loans and possibly investing and getting access, to capital. But I don't see that happening, because you see that, some of the biggest economies like the US believe that interest rates might remain on the high side for a bit longer than would want, and that is expected. So I don't see that, the central bank is going to go ahead or run ahead of some of the major central bankers in terms of aggressive easing of the monetary policy by cutting rates by that much, because they need to be able to look at the external things, factors that does affect their decisions. And certainly, the rand, we thought it might start coming down to 18 to the US dollar. All of a sudden, now we are 19.20. So that volatility and uncertainty, coupled with the fact that fuel is going up. And certainly, you also see that some of the commodity prices, like platinum, have actually remained below 1,000, for a little bit while. I think sitting at $154. So all those things basically might not support aggressive cutting of interest rates.
Excuse me. So where do we get some relief, Mr. Botha, for ordinary South Africans? I mean, you've mentioned the numbers, and I'm sure you put a smile on many people by saying, please, Mr. Reserve Bank Governor Lisicha Kganyago, drop interest rates by 300 basis points next time you guys meet as the MPC. But the reality is, with the household expenditure being low and dropping, as Mr. Busha was saying, to 0.3%, it tells you the picture that households are having it still tough. But where can they find relief from an economic point of view, Mr. Botha?
Well, it's very difficult, let's be quite honest. The only people that I have more sympathy for than households that are battling with salaries that are not keeping pace with inflation is, of course, for unemployed people, because they have, by definition, zero income, except perhaps if they get the COVID grant, which is not too bad, but that needs to be lifted to the minimum food level, which I've been lobbying for the last year, and I believe that is in the pipeline, probably before the election. But in the meantime, we need massive job creation. If you look at the average household size in South Africa, there is at least between 1 and 2 people that are not employed. Now, just imagine all those people get jobs. It just, it just eases the burden dramatically. Because those additional person,
but to have massive job creation means the economy has to grow at a particular level. What is that level, Mr. Busha?
Well, as I said to you, if you look in terms of what National Treasury have been saying, I think since 1994, we had very different and possibly some of them progressive policies in terms of trying to make sure that South Africa grows at a pace or rate that supports economic development, in particular, social development where people or households can have decent living. We have massive infrastructural problems, water infrastructure. I think if you look in terms of the National Treasury, they've just said that they're going to freeze new jobs as a way of cost-cutting measures. They're going to spend less on infrastructure. But is that infrastructure on power, with Eskom, Transnet, that should be able to drive, the economy and certainly bring employment? So we need, the GDP at least to be around 5 or above 5% to be able to create jobs in the country and reduce the amount of poverty or levels of poverty we see in the country. When we see obviously people going to the streets and the unrest, what that means basically people are under pressure to be able to have decent living.
Okay, we are concluding now. We just got less than 2 minutes to go. I just want to get your views as economists. Structural reform. Sometimes we keep on hearing that, right, to say we need government to implement very, very strong structural reforms to the economy. Reform this economy, unleash the power of business, incentivize and all of that, and then we'll be okay. Would you agree with that, Mr. Botha, very briefly?
Yes, absolutely. We have embarked on a new approach towards economic policy in this country under President Ramaphosa, which I'm very delighted at. We've just handed over the keys to a private company of our biggest export harbor in South Africa, which is great. But what we need to do is to drill down. It's fantastic for all the CEOs of more than 100 companies now to pledge that they will work together, but it needs to be filtered down to almost monthly meetings between the people in these organizations, like engineers, like project managers, to come forward with business plans. So how can the private sector work with the public sector at all levels, municipal, provincial, and national, to secure jobs? Because it's the most effective way to combat poverty is to create a job.
Okay, Mr. Busha, final word to you.
So certainly, I think we need to create jobs. We need to have, the country working for the majority of the people. So there's a massive need for structural reform in terms of the economy, creating new jobs, creating new employers. Because I think, we haven't seen expansion. South Africa, needs to make sure that there is a bank that can be accessible to people. So we need to make sure that also the central bank, Reserve Bank, does not just use inflation as a measure of their own performance. We need to say, how do we make job creation and poverty alleviation being part of the solution to be able to manage the economy?
Joseph Makamba Busha and Roelof Botha, thank you, gentlemen, for your time this afternoon. They are both economists. We're just unpacking with us the state of our economy, with the cost of living crisis that is affecting all of us. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time here on today. And shortly, we'll be in the world of sport.